welcome to another episode of the ADHDads. I'm your host, JJ.
And I'm CJ.
Hey, buddy, what do you think we're going to talk about today? What do we need to get off our chests?
Oh, I don't know about how your summer's been going, but there's a lot of emotions flying around in our house with five of us being home all the time. So,
Oh,
emotions, man, sound like a pretty good topic to me.
oh, just here, I don't know if you could hear that, but I was letting out some breath, giving myself a second before I get into talking about how I also feel about summer and visiting family and the energy that goes through all that and the emotions that, of course, spring up the good, the bad, all the things. And neurodivergent kid come into a house with a bunch of personalities, some young ones, some older ones, and all of them wanting the opportunity to speak all at the same time. My kiddo, his energy, of course, is spiking at any moment, and therefore the emotions will definitely go from high to low to massive output. So yeah, emotions are a good place to talk about for sure. And I think one thing, is emotional security. We should really dive into that. What does emotional security mean for us in our relationships? And dare I suggest, even more important to the next generation, how do we create that safe space for our kids emotionally? And if we're creating that emotional safe space for them, do they know that they have an emotional safe space and do they believe it? I think that's a
Mm.
tough thing. Is I don't know if I could say ever with 100% confidence that I've created an emotional safe space opportunity for my kiddo, as much as I'd like to say I work really well on myself and my empathy and my validation with my kiddo. I think it's always a challenge, and of course there's always a new situation that presents itself. So
Mm.
I am excited to talk about this topic with you. I think we're going to go through a lot of good stuff, and I'm sure there'll be some great takeaways.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to talk about it with you because we've got a lot going on here on this topic as well. We've been talking the last few weeks about all the big life transitionings that are happening in our household, and so everybody's home, and we're trying to figure out summer, and we've implemented some of the strategies that we've talked about. But with everybody being here all the time, all at once, everybody's got high emotions during this time with all of this big life stuff going on, and it's fun to navigate. What you're I like what we're talking about here today with that space of emotional security and space, because we allow that, and I'm interested to hear your take on it with one kiddo where we have three here, and everybody's combating for their emotional space, and they're throwing their hats into the ring, and trying to draw their boundaries of what emotional space looks like, and sometimes that can overlap, right, and or maybe encroach upon one kid's emotional safety space. So I'm interested to hear the things that you say, and how it comes into play with the dynamic of three kiddos that are trying to kind of battle that out and claim that, and express themselves, and what that looks like. Because I can tell you can get kind of hairy, JJ, when there's five emotions flying around, and you're trying to give everybody the space to express it. Sometimes you can feel a little encroached upon yourself and your emotional needs. So yeah, man, I'm interested to talk about some strategies with you, and what we kind of think are the healthy and unhealthy dynamics in revolving to this. In regards to this, my goodness, if my wife was only here next to me today. But yeah,
well,
man, what's been going on in your world? Because like I said, we implemented
mhm,
some of those
mhm.
strategies here. We got our schedule up on the chalkboard, and we've made some serenity jars for our calm corners, and we've put all this stuff into place here to try to help the kids out with what's going on, and we are day 7 into a 28-day no yell challenge.
Ooh.
So we're experimenting this with our family right now, and thinking about new daily tasks every day, as far as like what boundaries look like, and safe words, and we're even making a game out of this. And every day, that we go, whoever yells gets a tally. At the end of this 28 days, the person with the least amount of tallies wins a special prize. So, it's just something that we're doing daily, trying to be really intentional and present about. where our emotions are on the scale, and what someone is making us feel, and how to address it and communicate without the volume of our voice. So it's been interesting,
Hmm.
man. I'm winning right now. I only have two tallies, which is but it's been rough, man. I'm close. I'm on a fast hurdle to my third one
Oh
today. It's
man.
been a rough day today. So
Yeah,
where are you at?
it can be incredibly tough, buddy. And we don't have, like, I have this mute button, so I can, as soon as I hit that mute button, I can yell all I want, and I can get the prize because I've got a mute button. But in real life, no, we're not working with mute buttons and stuff. So, but that's kind of a good reminder for us. Like, when we're on mute, nobody can hear us talk or yell or breathe. And what do we need? We need that time and space a lot, through most of those situations. And of course, like you said, you've got the kids in the room, and they're all combating, with vying for something. I experienced that this last week as well. But then, of course, the adults, if they're not in an emotionally secure place with themselves, how are they going to then handle those situations? So, of course, we got to dial it back and kind of ask ourselves first. And that big thing is that pause and that breathing. And when we don't when we don't give ourselves that space, because we suggest we need to problem solve in the moment, usually that problem solving is problem, amplifying and
Mm,
escalation and stuff, because we haven't gotten to that place of emotional security. And it's not that difficult to kind of sit back and say, okay, I have the power here to control my emotions and control how I respond. But too often we get that, that fight or flight going on in our amygdala, and everything is just kind of acting up. And then we just, unfortunately, we run with that. And instead of trying to calm the wind, we let it blow us and take us into, face first into the wall. And next thing you know, there's a massive accident that everybody's trying to clean up. So yeah, last week I had kiddo with his two cousins that he adores, and man, I've seen some of the biggest smiles come from my kiddo's face when he's with his cousins. But he also does have to compete for various time and resources and toys and stuff with them present, and that's hard for him because he is a single boy otherwise. And so I guess what that just is a reminder to us is we need to create with us the tools and the skills to navigate around the triggers that will pop up at any moment with our kids, because my God, they're going to pop up. We know it, and that's the thing, we know it. And for some reason we don't create a game plan sometimes to handle it. But all that aside, I guess what I could say is, I do have single kiddo most of the time, and so therefore the ability to handle my triggers should be that much easier, because he's not in a peer pressure situation. He's not fighting some sort of a sibling rivalry taking place. If anything, he's just being a little bit irate, and man, I should be able to handle that. So long-winded answer to what you were saying. There's much for me to learn and to work with that I think we can talk about today to help bring our best selves to our kiddos, and then for them to feel confident and safe with us. So yeah.
well, what before we get started in talking about this, what does emotional security mean to you? Like,
Mm.
what does that look like?
The simple answer I could say is it's built. It's relationship building. It starts from there. As soon as I can tell myself, um, I can't necessarily trust this person with what I have to say, then I realize that some emotional security has been lost. So it often is built and destroyed on response. So the big things that I kind of focus on are, are we rejecting or dismissing feelings? Are we validating and empathizing? Are we suggesting, hey, it's okay to make mistakes? Are we open-minded? So we're not, once something gets uncomfortable, are we allowing ourselves to kind of further explore that, or are we shutting ourselves off because now it's just beyond our comfort zone? And then, are we being supportive and unconditional in our love? We can be dare I suggest, unconditional in our love, but not unconditional in our approval. So there's just
Mm,
all this different relationship building that takes place. And of course, going back to yourself, like, if you're not self-aware then you are kind of probably not bringing your safe self to the equation. And then, of course, man, a huge one that I really love for parents to kids is being able to share. So sharing in your own vulnerability and suggesting that this is a two-way street where I'm going to learn something from you, my kiddo, at whatever age you are. You're creating a safe place for them because they can trust you because you trust them. Instead of saying, well, I'm the adult, you need to listen to me because I said so. That's shutting down one way and creating a one-way street only. And that's not going to result in a smooth relationship. That's going to result in one person be feeling that they don't have the right to talk to you because or about whatever it is because you are not going to accept it. And that's a scary place to be as a kid who I look up at my parents. They're my protector. Well, maybe they're not my protector because I have these feelings and they're being rejected. So there's a lot of stuff to kind of unpack there, but that ultimately that answer is when I don't have that trust anymore or that trust is frayed, then emotional security is most likely frayed.
Yeah, I think it's a big two-way street, to the responder and to the emotional giver. Often when we hear somebody unload on us, it's often how we respond that creates the emotional safety for them, and they either feel, oh, I can tell this person anything and feel safe in my emotions, or, I don't, and they're telling me I shouldn't feel this, or or I should feel this way instead, or I should do this, or I should do that, or I should handle it this way, or they get mad at my emotions because of the level at which I'm giving them, and I think that it's a really tricky like dance for us as parents to go into this topic with our kids, because we don't want to create a situation that's like your emotions are bad, right? Like whatever you're feeling is bad or you shouldn't feel it. But we also don't want to create a dynamic that's like you get to just go in there and scream and break things and make a mess of it just to get your feelings out, right? Like we have to have this really delicate communication with our kids of like, it's okay to feel what you're feeling, but maybe there's another way to handle it, to display it, to communicate it, to use your emotions to get what you need or what you want out of a interaction, relationship, of a person, of a communication. And so that's the really tricky part, is how do we like teach our kids that your emotions aren't good or bad, they're just kind of there to help guide us, and then we have to be the ones that are intelligent enough and patient enough to pause and take that emotional information and put it through a descrambler, to present to the outside world that is in a proper etiquette and in a way that could be heard, responded to, loved and accepted and met with patience and grace, right?
Mm. Yeah. And the brilliant thing, like you just said there too, is part of the descrambling is just simply being able to listen and be curious. Even though our kids are kids, we don't want to discount the fact that they are human beings. So you said, the anger piece, it's okay. It is a thing, you are feeling that. How do you respond to that? That's a conversation you continue to have. Like if they, I had a conversation with my kiddo one time recently, and I said, well, do you think it would be okay if when your friend is mad at you in this situation for them to hit you? And his surprising answer was yes. And I was like, oh, right. Well, I wasn't expecting this turn, but let's unpack that further. So then I have to ask additional questions to get to the heart of the matter and to also get to the understanding that he is working through in his brain. Because, I think if we were to actually play out the scenario in real time and he'd say, they hit me and I'm pissed and now I'm going to hit them, he'd start to unpack everything and say, well, this doesn't seem like the outcome that I would prefer. I would be hurt, they would be hurt. And it's that patience piece that I talked about earlier then too, is the opportunity to breathe and take a moment to really talk about it and just think about it and reflect. That's something that we don't give ourselves enough, because just like out in traffic, we suggest, oh, we need to get around this car, we need to get around this car, we need to get there as fast as possible, and we're impatient with everybody around us. if we kind of just sat back and thought, well, I don't think saving those 2 seconds is going to be, vital to my day. Perhaps it's okay. And, I mean, everybody's situation is a little different, but I got to be honest. I think sometimes we just suggest to ourselves, we put the story in our heads of anxiety that we got to get through this situation as fast as possible. And therefore we end up vomiting all over our kids and we
Yeah.
create a larger mess. And I wanted to say too, like, I'll probably say this at the end, and I know we'll reflect back on the conversation too, but I really believe wholeheartedly in the idea of there's never a point where you can't return and talk about something. You can still have a conversation. If things went really terribly and the two of you feel like, or whoever you are in relationship with, whoever you had a breakdown with, you still have the opportunity to create a healing moment. Some things are bigger than others and it's harder to move past them. But if you don't create the opportunity to have a healing moment, you won't have a healing moment. So I would always encourage everybody and remind everybody that, you're good inside. You're a good person who maybe had a really difficult moment, and you can come back to that moment and talk about it and apologize and work with this person that you've had some sort of trust loss with to build it up again.
Yeah, and I really like the point that you said too, about we often want to just move through this stuff as quickly as possible. And I've been talking about it for many past episodes here. I think that each of these really hard moments are really great opportunities to double down and learn something and really connect if you do it in the right way. But oftentimes we're so like distracted by all of the emotional buildup and output that's been going out, during a conversation, that you get too lost in the, I want to feel this and I want to work through it, and there's something beautiful on the other side. You're too lost in this just feels too bad right now, and I need to go into these feelings, and you've echoed between private conversations between you and I about the idea of like when we have these emotional outbursts, it's usually because the person that is having the emotional outburst doesn't have, we've lost all of our resources and we don't have any more ideas on how to handle the situation.
Mm.
Or
Mm.
what was the requote that you quoted from somebody else?
So they, I heard it from a really wise person, not directly, but the idea was, if you've been triggered and you act out based on that trigger, it's because you've essentially run out of the tools and skills that you had or could have in regulating yourself and your state in
Yeah.
that moment. And I do believe that's incredibly true. When a parent or grandparent yells at their kid or grandkid, that's an indication that, hey, I'm no longer in control of myself here, and I need you to help regulate me. Which, of course, from a kid's perspective, that's terrifying and that's scary, and that's escalation to them. And
Yeah.
I witnessed that recently, and there was fear, there was terror, there was running away and crying. Clearly, the yelling that I witnessed from this person toward the kiddo was not the step to repair and resolve. Instead, it was another point of possible trauma for one to try and escape from. I can't express my frustrations and my anger around this person, because they will actually try and make it even more of an out of control situation. So I'm not safe here. I mean, that's essentially what I witnessed, and it was sad. It was hard to watch, and I had the benefit of being able to talk to this kiddo and even say, and empathize and validate how they felt, and say, that was really scary, and the way that you were responded to was not okay. It was unsafe, and I understand why you ran away scared and cried. Um, while that might not have healed everything that needed to be healed, it did offer that "I hear you, I see you" um, opportunity for the two of us to make that connection and feel that emotional security as best as we could in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was tough.
I think that when we yell, it really, you boil it down to its most base level. It really is about control. It's really about power. It's, I don't feel powerful right now, so I want to make myself demonstrative, big, to
Mm-hmm.
overpower, to
Mm.
feel like I'm heard, and when we don't feel heard, we feel very powerless, and when we feel misunderstood, we feel powerless. And I think that we yell to try to get that back, to just
Mm.
feel heard, to be validated, to be understood, and to feel important. And I think it's just the wrong answer, because I think that curiosity is a way more powerful tool to understand another person's emotions than overpowering them is.
Mm.
And I think that we as parents have just run out of the tools in how to control a situation, or how to get our kids to do what we need them to do, or to listen to us the first time, or and we have run out of the tools. So the yelling is the, you better fix your behavior so that I can
Mm.
get my emotions into check. And that's just really unfair on our kiddos who don't have this awareness or this knowledge or intellect that we're talking about right now,
Mm.
or or just the emotional savvy to put words to what's going on in their head. And we often disregard that and forget that when those emotions overtake us.
Yeah.
And I think that it's just can be traumatizing, how we put our kids in that position sometimes.
And I mean, the thing is when we see our kiddos acting up and they're in disagreement with each other, we essentially are watching a train that could go to a derailment or just a wreck. But we have the opportunity to create redirects. There's more tracks out there. There's a change in direction that we can take here if we allow ourselves just a little bit of time to kind of work through that before we jump in. If we jump in and we get on the same train that's already going so dang fast, and the curve's coming up, and we can't turn that together, we're actually steering that into an accident, and that gets us to a worse place. And we know there's no point that I could think of where I jumped in and I yelled at the kids, and then that was perfect. It couldn't have ended any better. Like that reflection doesn't happen. um,
Yeah.
so, but yeah, I mean, we mentioned a few things earlier, and one thing that I don't remember exactly your words, but it really hit me there. Was the idea, like, let's say your kid brings something of their feelings to you, and you as a parent, you dismiss the feelings in a sense. And maybe it's a good intention where you're hoping to make your child more resilient by saying, don't let it get to you. But what happens there? Our child, they'll feel like there's no safe place for support. Their trust is lost. Their anxiety can be developed in relationships to come, because I brought this to this person and it was kind of dismissed and rejected. Apparently, there's something wrong with me. So the intention could be good, where the parent is saying they believe their child will persevere through this, but instead it teaches the child to not trust his or her feelings, and it can result in a loss of self-esteem as well as like judgment of their own thoughts and feelings. So that's something that when you mentioned that, I was like, oh man, I've been a part of this exchange on the receiving end of, after expressing my feelings, and starting to question, not only this relationship, do I have trust and safety here, but do I have trust and safety with myself? It's a very,
Mhm.
very hurtful thing that we sometimes do unintentionally when we try and dismiss those feelings. And how do we get around that?
Well,
Do we? Oh, go ahead.
well, go ahead and finish first, and then I'll wrap up my point.
Oh, sure, buddy. So like, do we use positive statements instead of saying like, "Hey, that's not true"? Could you say like, "How do you see that as true for you?" Or do you believe it? How is it helping you right now? And is it something that's caring or kind to yourself? Like taking that to a direction of positivity rather than rejection. That's one thing that I've been trying to implement when I believe my kiddos' statements are a little bit, internally focused, and he's not seeing maybe the people that he's having an exchange with. I don't want to suggest to him just right away, like, you're not seeing that right, or saying, he's saying, I'm just no good. He's even used the tough statement. He said, I'm just too stupid. I don't want to say you're not stupid. I want to first talk to him about that. If he allows for that safe conversation with dad, This is
Yeah.
how I feel. This is why I feel it. Man, that's really hard. Sorry, that will continue on in a
I
bit.
no, I would like to hear about where, like, maybe where those conversations go, or where those feelings come up. Is it because of the consequences of the social interaction that make him feel like that, or where do those come up, but I think that, like, what you said earlier was a really good point about, like, it's okay to kind of go back and mess it up every once in a while and go back and try to fix it, rather than trying to have it fixed all the time as we're walking through it, because, like, we are humans, right? And we're gonna mess this up, and you're not gonna be able to, like, have, like, a complete open field of emotional security for your kids all the time. Like, as much as I want to every second of every day, like, I am also a human that needs, you know emotional security, and to know that I can have a safe space to, like, have emotions too. And if I'm just doing creating that for everybody else on the field, like, I'm not going to have any room for my boundaries, right? So, like, it's hard, and sometimes my boundary needs to be a little bit bigger than what I usually take up, right, to allow for everybody else's emotions, because on any given day, I think our boundaries change in this space. Sometimes we need a big emotional boundary and day to get stuff out, and a little bit of forgiveness and love, and sometimes we need a lot of it. And so, it's we're going to mess up, and I think that, we have to have forgiveness and grace. And I think that that's really what emotional security and safety is. It's forgiveness and grace. It's allowing the other person to feel their feelings and not go, well, they're an asshole, they're always a jerk, they're inherently bad because they're always throwing fits, they're always, emotional, or this and that. It's having the patience and forgiveness to be like, this, it's okay, you know what, get it out, cry, kick, scream. But I think that it's also important to rein that in too, to not just let that go on and build and build and build and build until, you've overtaken everybody else's emotional boundaries. Like, I think that, again, you have to kind of let that play out, but also have the patience to say, well, okay, let's talk about it now. Let's forgive it, or let's dive deeper into, what Cohen's feeling of why is he saying he feels stupid, rather than just, I feel stupid. You just got to let him call himself stupid and stupid and stupid, and let that build. You gotta pull that in somehow, right? We have to help him define that better, communicate that better.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and
how do we do that? How do you do that? What do those conversations look like? What tools do you use on those moments?
oof, that's a tough one, of course, because when somebody says something so hurtful about themselves, that's a place that you don't want to simply say, yeah, yeah, I know, yeah, I'm sure you do feel stupid in this moment. Like, that's a different form of validation that we want to kind of try and avoid. So how do we do that? Like, again, back to the, that's not true. You don't want to simply do that. You want to kind of unpack it with them in the safest way possible. And again, back to that idea of creating that safe space of time and breathing, for the two of you or more, is of utmost importance, because that'll save yourself, headaches and worse down the line. This isn't something that, you're just needing to get through and get it over with, so then therefore you can move on to the better day. We're not just talking about the day, we're talking about the week, the month, the years ahead. It builds up, man. And if you don't allow for it today, who knows what's going to happen tomorrow, and will they trust you? So that emotional security piece is something that happens every day. And honestly, the more efficient it is by giving it time and space and breathing when it's occurring. So the boundaries too, you bring up the boundaries thing. That's something that I've wrestled with just the idea of, what does the boundary look like within the family, and what does it look like when it's more than just the family? Like,
Yeah.
I can create a script and a family plan, but what does that look like when somebody else is, essentially knocking at the door, and that changes the whole dynamic, or at least it feels like it does, because they're not entering into the family plan that we've created and agreed upon within our family. Now we're having to either accommodate or, push against somebody else. That's tough.
Well, yeah, I mean, my problem with the emotional security lately is, like, how much do you allow for that? because there's 5 of us in our family, right? I mean, there's 3 kids in here, and all of them want the space to be able to express their emotions. And with a neurodivergent kid, sometimes the emotions of a neurodivergent kid can take precedence over the other ones.
The loudest
Sometimes
one in
that
the room.
Exactly. The loudest one in the room gets the attention, right? And our neurodivergent kiddos can make a lot of noise when it comes to these emotional moments. So it's kind of like, where do we draw the line and say, well, other siblings need their space too? And we had an incident this last week where part of our schedule is we do choice time. So, after we get to our afternoon part, and there's a 2-hour block where the kids get to pick a special activity. We have like a family adventure book where they get to do like arts and crafts, where we all do one big family thing together. Or, it's been a lot of pool visits when Naomi gets to pick, because she loves swimming, loves the pool. So it's always, she gets to go to the pool, but it was Aubrey's day to pick this day. And Naomi didn't want to do what Aubrey wanted to do, and she had her choice day just the day before, so we spent more than half of that time, JJ, that choice time that was supposed to be Aubrey's day. We spent all that block of time trying to convince Naomi why she needed to be okay with sacrificing that choice time, because it wasn't her day, it was siblings. So we had a lot of talks about empathy and sharing and all of these things, but with trying not to yell, because we're in this challenge where we're doing this stuff, trying different methods. So we're trying to like be curious and patient and find out what's going on with her and dive into this. But that's a process that doesn't just happen in 3 minutes, JJ. We end up half of that choice time, and I'm sitting there just like watching the seconds tick by, just feeling bad for Aubrey. Like, she didn't get her day today. We took away that whole day, is still focused on Naomi, and no one got what they wanted. We still didn't go to the pool. We didn't do Naomi's thing, but all the attention was focused on her rather than Aubrey, and it was her day. And I just felt bad. And I was just thinking, we were talking about going into this episode, and I think, as a parent, you want to create this endless, infinite space of emotional security, right? But again, that's not realistic. We're humans in this real reality situation. And if you're in a family where there's 5 people who all have needs, how do you create the boundary? There's a boundary to emotional security in space, right? You have to at one point say, okay, your emotions are sucking the emotions out of somebody else or affecting somebody else, and how do you do that in a way that is not, one, shaming her or embarrassing her, or making her feel bad for it, but is also in a way that can get to resonate with her.
Refer back to the previous episode, people.
To resonate with her, and to make her really like think about this the next time, which again can be difficult with neurodivergent kids. Empathy is a struggle where we have to really take some time into talking about that. And at the end of this, I brought up to my wife, when is the boundary? When do we say no? When do we say, okay, then you're not coming with, you're sitting here, we're going to go, or there's a consequence, or something has to happen for us to pause on this and give Aubrey back her time. And, we just kind of landed on, with a neurodivergent kid, it's going to be a little different. We're all going to have to make accommodations and learn, about this. And Aubrey is a part of that too, and there may be days where we have to maybe focus a little bit more on the neurodivergence, because it needs a little bit more attention, because it can affect the household so much more, and the emotional temperature of things. So that does need a little bit more. And unfortunately, that is life, right? And life isn't fair. We can't give everybody a third of all the time. At some point, they're going to turn 18 and they're going to get accepted into different colleges and make different salaries and go to different jobs and have different relationships. And life is not going to be fair for them. you
Yeah,
know.
right.
And again, in a family of five, that's something that we constantly have to have conversations around, you know, in a very delicate way, you know, and not in a way that like maybe our generation of parents did with us of life isn't fair, get used to it, kid, you
Right.
know. But it's also of like, look, this is the way things work and you have to be okay with it. How can I help you be okay with that?
Mm.
What do you need to communicate with me? And, you know, so that we can talk about this rather than you either internalizing it, shutting down, or becoming resentful to the rest of the world because they have things that you don't.
Mm. That is really tough, buddy, and I'm sure you've felt that frustration and that exhaustion of those days where it didn't go as planned, and even though you might have expected the possibility, it still hurts, and you're still trying to come up with, well, okay, what is our next game plan on that? And I don't know if I have a beautiful answer to those days, because those days are going to happen. You're right. Sometimes you're gonna go out there and you're gonna swing a big old fat strike, and it's gonna suck when you strike out, because you expected to hit that home run and be the hero of the game, and the next thing you know, you missed every single pitch, and now the team loses or whatever it is. And I think the thing, I'm curious about, because I honestly have not implemented this well myself. I'll give you an example in a second. Is how do we create the consequence with our kids? So how do we create an agreement like, okay, if this scenario, and granted, our kids will find the loopholes, they will find the cracks, they will get the water out through the possible cracks in the plan as much as possible, so they've leaked it all out, and next thing you know, we're wiping up the mess. But how do we give them at least some sort of understanding and power of the choice of what this looks like should something happen? The more we can create that contract, dare I suggest, with our kids going into a situation, the less surprise essentially they should have over the consequence when something goes a certain direction. And that to me is of utmost importance. My example from this last week was, I brought the kids out, brought a baseball bat and a ball, and I was essentially the pitcher. And I said, everybody wants to bat, because what happens when you hit that ball and it goes flying? Oh my gosh, that's so awesome, so exciting. So kiddo and his cousins, I said to everybody, okay, regardless if you hit the ball, each kid gets 3 swings, and then we rotate. Well, I didn't explain the rules well enough. My kiddo took 3 swings and 3 misses one time. And he said, well, it wasn't fair. I didn't hit the ball. And I said, yeah, but we are just doing the 3 swings, and then we rotate out. Your chance will come, and, your cousin might throw or might hit it 3 times, or might not hit it once. And then we rotate out again. That's just the plan. And he was protesting, even tossed the bat down as opposed to handing it to the next kid and stuff. And I was, I felt myself kind of getting a little bit agitated with the situation, and how he was trying to basically get a larger piece of the pie. And therefore, I was no longer in that state of emotional regulation. I was compromised. And then when he
Mm-hmm.
kept complaining, I said, all right, Cohen, I've explained the rules to you, and now we're just talking about it over and over, that we're not making any sort of progress in this conversation, so I want you to sit out. So then he starts crying because he's not playing, and he really wants to play, and then I'm attending to that. So finally, I just handed the ball over to his cousins, and I said, okay, you two, if you can play together, I'm going to go inside with Cohen right now to talk about this. And then I went in and I blathered to him way too long about the situation. Whereas if I would have taken the time to say, hey kids, here's the layout. Here's what we can expect in the game. Do you all agree that this makes sense? Great. Okay, what happens if it doesn't go well? What should we do in that moment? And then the kids, who knows what we would have come up with. But having that prep time, bringing everybody into that and having a greater understanding, sure, there would have been hiccups along the way, and I know somebody would have complained, but I still believe that because they had the opportunity to come to an agreement outside of just me deciding for them, I think it would have resulted in something as a better outcome. And therefore, they all would have felt a little bit more heard and seen in those moments.
Yeah. I think that, you mentioned compromising there too. And I think that that's what we do with this emotional security is we sacrifice our own security to accommodate somebody else's in these moments, especially when they're our kids, right? Like we get caught in these moments where you maybe establish a boundary and then your kid has a big display of emotion and you don't want that, right? We want to avoid it. So we start compromising. We start retracting the boundary. We start reneging on, the things that we set. And I think that it's really important, the scream free challenge that we're doing right now. And some of the things that we're thinking about are really about preemptively, like you said, before things begin, you have to establish the boundaries. And then we really make sure that the kids know the boundaries. Okay, repeat them back to me. What did I just say? What are the boundaries here? And what happens if we go over the boundaries? Okay, so everybody is an understanding of what happens here. And, I think the next piece of it is when the boundary is crossed is we just have to, live up to what we said we were going to. If the 3 swings is out, well, unfortunately, kid, you gotta sit it out, and we have to have maybe a detached emotion from that too, because again, that we start getting riled up and we start compromising, which means that maybe we start having an emotional response because we're compromising our emotional security to accommodate somebody else's. And then, before you know it, your tone has changed and you're no longer emotionally secure and you're just flying all over the place or maybe that can be in the form of too much talking too. You know what I mean? When really it's just as simple as this is the boundary. You told me you understood the boundary, and now you're going to have to, you cross the boundary. So you're going to have to sit with the consequences, and the consequences may be how you're feeling in this moment, and, and I'm not saying just go let Cohen cry in the dugout and not say anything to him, but I think it is also important for our kids to have these emotions, right? Like maybe a 5-minute time of feeling that emotion and what that's like. And then once the emotion is kind of feathered out and, diluted a little bit and things calm down and they're more receptive, then we can come back and maybe have those long-winded conversations and maybe not so many words, and it could be, those conversations can look just as simple as, well, we did talk about what the boundary was before this, right? You did tell me you understood what it was, right? You did repeat that back to me. I remember that. Okay, so I told you did this. It resulted in this, and that is tough. But maybe we don't need to say more than that. We try to get so much into, and that is tough. And when I was your age, I did this and this thing happened to me and I felt just like you are now. And I learned this lesson when this thing happened to me. And, the thing I'm trying to tell you is this. And, before you know it, your kid's like, huh? And he's zoned out. He's thinking about Pokemon and he ain't even engaged into what just happened. He's already forgotten about those emotions, and it's us. And now we're like, oh God, how did I drop the ball? Did I say too much to him? I think I made him feel worse. Is he even thinking about that now? And now our day is ruined because we just went through this whole process, So I think that really like it can be as simple as like establishing, reaffirming, and then just sitting with the consequences when they play out instead of trying to fix or teach or learn from, maybe it can just be these little chunks, little snippets every time that they happen. Maybe we can add a little bit more to that conversation, maybe then the second time that this happens, it doesn't just end with, well, I told you this was going to happen. You did this. So that happened. Maybe it can go more into, once you do finish that conversation of, well, I told you this was happen and then this happened and that happened. We can add another piece of that conversation and circle back to, remember that happened last week when we did that baseball game with this, and well, here we are again. Then maybe that conversation goes, well, what did we learn? How do you feel different from that last time to this time? Maybe maybe the third conversation that we had is, how do you want to do it different next time? And as we go through these experiences and we get these biofeedbacks and social feedbacks from all these interactions, maybe we can help our kids understand it a little bit more and more and more each time that we do that. But it is going to happen more and more and more. And it's not going to be a one-time conversation. And the thing that I'm learning about parenting is I'm just going to have to have patience for my kid to fail 300 times, and maybe on 301 they might finally understand what I've been trying to tell
Oh
them this whole
man.
time.
Well, and I really love that and appreciate that, buddy. I just want to say, that's one of the brilliant things about being a human being and learning and growing is that mistakes are going to happen. And the way you have that conversation with your kiddo, it's gonna change how they respond in the future to something like that. Because failure is inevitable, and failure, of course, when we hear the word fail, I think too often we think it's an all or nothing game. And if I failed, then I'm bad. I'm no good. And then we leave it at that, and we put that judgment on ourselves, which really hurts. And sometimes unintentionally the parent leads the kid to that end. So example, I'm helping Cohen learn how to ride his bike without training wheels finally. And when he was when we were out in the parking lot trying to get going, I was running, pushing the seat and stuff, and he was looking down at the pedal, or looking down at the pedals in the bar, the steering. And I said, well, you got to look up too, buddy. Got to look up, because obviously if he's not looking up, who knows what he's going to run into. But how do you have that? How do you have that in the moment? What do you say? Do you say, look up or you're going to crash? Or do you say something that's encouraging? Hey, look up, buddy. Ha, good job. Awesome. Great job. And then, like you said as well, is like, what did you learn from that? What were some things that you saw in that excited you? Giving them the opportunity to really kind of process the stuff rather than telling them, this is what you get. This is what you are going to get if you do this. I'm preemptively threatening you by suggesting your action is going to result in failure. No, let's say mistakes happen along the way. Heck, cool. Well, awesome. Sounds like you got an opportunity to understand a little bit more about the process. What can you tell me about that? So I really appreciate that, because that's a big component that I think too many parents do when we're insecure in our own selves, that we put that on our kids.
Yeah. Yeah, it was in that book, Scream Free Parenting, too. That just that negotiation, that compromise, is also
Mm.
like a form of like that power control dynamic. It's like, he calls all these like power dynamics scream parenting. But
Mm-hmm,
they're not all.
mm-hmm.
They don't. That doesn't necessarily mean you're screaming all the time, right? Like scream parenting could also mean this compromise where your kid is, big emotions, and you say, oh, fine, just have the thing, just go away. That is like submission to that power dynamic, right? And you're ultimately like teaching your kid like scream, scream communication. That, well, if I just act big, I get my way. I get the thing
Mm-hmm.
that I want if I can just overpower other people with a bigger emotion. So we're still just kind of teaching them that scream dynamic, even when we're just
Yeah.
rolling over and submitting in these moments. And again, I think it really goes back to what we're saying. When we do that as parents, it's because we've just, I've lost all control. I don't know what to do. So just, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm so exhausted. So this is better than
Yeah.
yelling. So I'm just going to compromise and sacrifice my space and my security and my needs, you know, which will ultimately lead to more screen parenting.
Yeah, it'll set yourself up for the next moment. Not setting yourself up for the coping and the regulation. It'll set yourself up for your kid and you to have another power dynamic struggle, for sure. I wanted to touch on a couple things that we've talked about along the way here, and because I believe, at least through my experience of growing up and kind of the real, dare I suggest, the thing that I believe I needed most and didn't receive a lot of the time, that would have helped a lot in my emotional security within myself and within the relationship with my parents, and ultimately what's going to help that trust building with my son. So validation and empathy, I think, are just honestly of utmost importance in a relationship. I
Yeah.
believe they're, especially validation, it's the foundation of trust. I mean, what does it do? It suggests to your child, your feelings are important to me. You're actually saying, yes, I believe what you're saying is true. um, we don't have to agree on the details, but agreeing on the feeling that's brought in front of us is so valid, or so important to validate. And without that, I think our kids are gonna, they're gonna start to hesitate and withhold some of their emotions, and they're also going to question themselves more. So just as, how do you practice that? Sometimes just as simple as saying like that makes sense will be validation. You don't have to go further on if you're still trying to formulate, your response. If there's a response that's needed in the moment, just simply saying that makes sense is a way to validate someone. We can also validate a difficult emotion while also suggesting many actions are not okay, and we can set boundaries while we're validating. So, if you say, hey, you're angry, and I totally, I get that. That makes sense. I understand you're angry. It's still not okay to take the action of hitting somebody else in that moment. But anytime you have that expression of how you're feeling, that's okay. I get it. You're allowing your emotion to be heard, and you're saying, I feel this in this moment, and that hurts or that's tough. That's of utmost importance. Our children are much more likely to tell us, hey, I'm feeling frustrated in this moment. And then, let's say they're teenagers, and I was really frustrated in this moment, and I'm angry at this person for that. Like, they'll bring that to you while things become even more complex in their relationships, because you validated them from an early stage, rather than saying like, oh no, you're not seeing that right. Oh, they're so out of control, they're crying, clearly they don't have a control over their emotions. Well, if we say that, then we're basically saying, I don't trust your feelings. Your feelings don't make sense. You're out of control. What's wrong with you? And that's just a relationship trust killer. And then we don't want to go there with our kiddos. And empathy is kind of similar, but it also suggests the feeling that one is having. We can feel that as well. It's not an attempt at solving anything as much as it's an attempt to say, I hear you. That must be very tough. I can only imagine just how hurt you are right now. Like showing that empathy and saying, those emotions, I felt those too. Man, I'm so sorry. And not saying, I'm so sorry, here's what you need to do. But allowing our children to be themselves while also working towards safety for themselves and others, that really gets that emotional security and maturity moving. Just giving that, you're honestly just building emotional intelligence in your kids by simply saying very few words, but acknowledging and validating. It's more powerful for somebody to hear, that must be really hard for you, than to hear, no, you're not really like that at all. I know you're stronger than this. Because by providing a place of understanding and empathy, we open up the possibilities to soothing and strength. It might seem counterintuitive at times, but if we try to step outside of ourselves and think how we might feel in those moments, we realize empathy and validation help far more than rejection of our feelings and the, dare I say, air quotes, suggestion that we're better than we currently think and feel.
Mm. Man, I really like that. I think that that's probably I would say validation is probably, if I had to boil it down to one word, I think that that's probably would be people's most useful tool while trying to navigate this topic. Because man, do we spiral real quick and get caught up in the, well, yeah, because, or yeah, but, we just want to explain ourselves, and we really want to throw our why into the ring, and why we're validated by our response or by our actions, that we completely dismiss the other person's, right? We just want to defend ourselves so quickly that we often forget that validation piece. And if we could really just pause and validate before responding, I'm not saying you shouldn't respond, because I think that both parties' feelings and wants are just as important. I think that we get caught up in the how we express them, and sometimes that can be toxic or harmful to relationships and to kids and parenting, in the way that how we express it and the emotions that build up during that. But I feel that we both have valuable points of view to iterate here. But the more that we forget to validate, the more that we want to be self-defensive and reactive, rather than like patient and responding. So I think that, like, if you could just learn that one trick in communicating with your kids and your wife, even in these high emotion moments, of just, let's validate. And yes, I have a reason why I did that, but her reason why she made me do that is also just as important. And I think that we really have to get on board with that.
I've got another example. This last week we were visiting family, and the mini golfing was brought up as a as an activity that the kids could do with grandma and grandpa. And Cohen has never been mini golfing. Certainly has never been golfing. So he doesn't know the rules and kind of like the etiquette of play in mini golf. You know, it's not just storm through to get to the hole, but generally the idea is, you know, you hit the ball, the next person hits the ball, then after everybody's hit, whoever's furthest from the pin hits again. So he was kicking some ass. I mean, he was like getting close to the hole in his first couple shots, and everybody else was like, "Oh, hit the wall again. Guess I'm going back further than the
Yeah.
starting point here. Hit the wall again. I'm not even. Wait, we're on 3. Why am I on 5 then?" You know, so Cohen was doing really well, but what did that do? That resulted in him having to wait for everybody to hit, and then some of the times they would hit from further out into the hole, and then he was the last one or close to the last to hit it in. And he was so upset because not only did he not to get to hit the ball as much, but he got to hit his in last. So he was expressing himself very animated and frustrated. And then what happens? The adults don't take turns in trying to talk and listen. It was like, oh, no, this, no, actually, because of this, you got to hit last. No. So they were rejecting what he was saying, and they were not acknowledging or validating his emotional state. And they were going straight to, this is what it is. This is why you shouldn't be feeling that way. Even if
Yeah.
they didn't have to word it that way, that was how it was, you know, presented to him. So what we, of course, needed to do, like we talked about earlier, is first telling the rules of play and how the score works typically. And of course, we didn't give a rat's ass how the score was going, really. But, you know, then going into it. And then when Cohen was feeling those big emotions, say, first, you know, even though we're adults and we're like, yeah, it's mini golf. Wow. It's just mini golf, kid. Like, no, we don't go there. Instead, we say, man, that does sound really hard. I'm sure it's confusing and difficult, and that's frustrating and can be maddening at times, buddy. I'm so sorry. Here's how the game, you know, typically operates. Again, maybe not in the moment should we talk about the gameplay, but still, you know, actually giving him that, you know, empowerment, that voice to say, yeah, you do feel those feelings, and I totally understand your feelings, or at least I can understand why you'd feel that way.
Yeah.
We didn't do that. We jumped straight to the, here's why you shouldn't be feeling this way. Here's how it works.
Yeah.
Um, Classic example of how things can go wrong if we just don't put that emotional security in place.
Or like what you said earlier, how we just want to bulldoze through these uncomfortable situations. You know, you see somebody, especially in a group of, you know, peers or whatever, when you're out with people and someone starts having an emotional moment like that, you're, oh God, Debbie Downer, they're ruining the day. They should just go home. We all came in to have a good time. We paid money to be here. And, you know, you have all these subconscious and conscious thoughts that roll through your head of judgments and preconceived things, you know.
Hmm.
And yeah, it can derail it, man. But you know, instead, again, moving through it, especially with our kiddos, if we can just validate and take the time to just sit in that for a minute, and you know, let the family, let the couple in their 20s on their first date behind us as they're rolling eyes and want to play through, let them just fucking do that and play through, man.
Right.
And you know, have our moment and show up for our kiddos. And you know, before we go, I have to apologize to our listeners. You know, last time me and you talked, you told me the story about Cohen at the park or at the pool with your neighbor, and it didn't go well. And I got all fired up and started throwing out cuss bombs all left and right. And I was, you know, that's my display of anger. I feel like if I could just like roll out a whole bunch of like
Mm,
Yosemite Sam cuss words, I'll feel better. You know, and it never
mm.
does. It usually makes things worse. But as soon as we hit, you know, stopped hitting record on that episode, my wife goes, "Baby, I think you really need to like pay attention to your curse words. This is supposed to be a family show, and you got pretty worked up there." So,
Oh, buddy, I'll say this much. You know, talking about emotional security and supporting our kids and stuff. Your words and response really resonated with me.
shut up.
Resonated. But you know what? I'll just put it out there for you and for the listeners. Like, hey, man, I honor you in that, and I appreciate it. I know the cuss words can come out, but a big component of emotional security is support, and you felt that need to support and to defend the situation from the, because of the people you care about and love. So I really felt the love, even unconditionally in that moment, and I really want to honor you in that. So it meant a lot. It did give me the emotional security that you and I have in our relationship, and it did really hit home well for me, and I felt cared for and protected in that moment. So yeah, sometimes cuss words are used for good, even when they're used a little bit more frequently than we intend.
Well, I'm trying to get better and do some like replacement therapy with my
Mm.
communication. So I'm trying to use funk instead of the F word. So yeah, I was just funkin'
Funk, yeah.
pissed.
Funk and peeved.
But
Yeah.
I'm glad we did this today, man. I think that there was some good talks here, and yeah, this is an easy thing when emotions are flying, and I know that we've
Mm.
both been living through it this summer. Um, but I'm glad that we got together and talked about this. I think there's some gold here, and I think that we're doing good work. Doing what we're doing, even with all the hiccups, mistakes, and hurdles that we bulldoze through. So
Oh man, I am gonna kind of round out this whole thing and just remind everybody too that there's rarely ever a point where it's too late to work on things and to build up that emotional security and trust. And honestly, sometimes with our little ones, a hug is more powerful than words. Obviously, words and actions are what build the trust. And so if our children are no longer want to hug because of what we've said, we need to return to working through that and really listening and validating. And once we get to that point where we've done the validation piece enough and they feel comfortable with us, and then they're hurting and sad, especially when they're little, man, sometimes that hug is enough to say, this is my protector, this is my safe space, I know this because they tell me so, and now I get this beautiful moment of embrace after everything. Watch an episode of Full House, where the music always comes up in the end and they solve the problem in under 22 minutes and life is grand again. You know, it doesn't look just like that. It looks a little bit more messy, a few more F bombs in the middle of it all, who knows? But when we practice that opportunity to come at the end of all that together, to really listen to the other person, to give them that space, we breathe, we've acknowledged our part in it, and we've acknowledged their part in it, and we can validate each other. That's when the music comes up, and then you get the rolling of the credits. We've done a good job, and it doesn't have to be pretty throughout the whole thing. In fact, that's where the mistakes thing happens in us adults sometimes too. But man, we have some amazing power to come back around and get that hug for our kids, the thing that they really need, that hug and validation. It's something that people, I want to tell you, I've heard people say recently, like, I probably created trauma in my kid. I've done this, like, they throw up these, really self-destructive statements about themselves and how they showed up for their kids. Well, you know what? You can still continue to show up. You've obviously done an effort to try and do better the next time around by simply acknowledging the things that you've made mistakes of. Don't tell yourself that you're an absolute failure and there's nothing you can do. There's a lot that you can still do.
yeah, that's right, guys. Don't bulldoze through those mistakes like we've been talking about here. Take your time with it and learn a thing or two and really feel the emotions that go along with that, because there's some gold there. And JJ and I can help you do that. That's what we do with the dad coaching stuff. So if you guys are interested in that stuff, you can reach out to us on the website at the ADHDads.com. You can put in your email there, and we can get you some information on the coaching that we do. And right now, my family and I are beta testing this 28-day no yell challenge. But I'm developing something for you guys to put on the website soon. So be looking forward to that, and hopefully by the summer here, JJ and I will have some curriculum up for you guys, and how we plan to coach, and what our journey and curriculum looks like. But if you guys are kind of interested interested in that now and don't want to wait for that gold, you can hit us up on the website and we can start the process early and give you some more information around that. But there's some really exciting things to come in the next couple of months here as we get our butts in gear and really solidify some stuff to actually have you guys print out and take home and implement in your family, and understand what our kind of coaching style and the goods that we would give you look like a little bit better. So I will put our book recommendations up in the show notes as usual, and I will continue to update you guys on my journey in this beta testing phase, and we'll give you guys little snippets as we go on. But I know that I appreciated this conversation, and I hope you guys did too. And if you did, reach out and please share that with us. We always love to hear from you. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I'm your host, CJ.
I'm JJ.
And this is the ADHDads.